Welcome back to Inside the Therapy Room and Packing Mental Health. You're here with your host, Adriana, and I have a guest who you've already met, Miss Dana.
Hello, hello.
So excited to have you here to talk to us about boundaries.
Let's
So,
do it.
a lot because, I feel like you have a different perspective than I have when it comes to boundaries, and I think you've been doing boundaries with more people than I have.
Oh my gosh, we talk boundaries all the time. I talk
Mhm.
boundaries and I just get eyes like glazed over or just rolling of eyes because what do you mean I have to set a boundary? What do you mean? What does that look like? Then I'm like, and usually, and we can get into this later, but boundary work is part of the work.
It really is, and, people don't understand, they're so underestimate. They're like, "Oh, that's just not gonna get better by itself." No, you have
No,
to put a boundary in.
it doesn't magically just form into the way that you want it to, right? And I feel like sometimes things will, but then that just usually means that there's maybe a lack of boundaries on the other part if people are taking responsibility for other people's things. So, which is a
It really
boundary
is.
issue on their part. Yeah.
Yeah. So disclaimer, this is advice and suggestions. True boundary help should come from a therapist that you're working with who understands you and what you're going through because boundaries are hard and they're also very personal and they're also very specific according to whatever you got going on in your life. Yeah. So, what are boundaries, Dana, for you?
Okay. How would I like definition wise of a boundary? So I'll work with kind of boundaries is, I would say, a set of rules or guidelines that I'll say I, first person, that the individual places for themselves according to their values and to their standards and to their needs.
Love that.
I can try to repeat that again because it's like, how would I define boundaries, right? Boundaries being a set of guidelines and rules or standards that we apply individually to ourselves in accordance to our morals, our values, and our needs. There it is, our needs, right? Because that's really the framework that I work with when I discuss boundaries. The emphasis on the boundary is for me. If
Yeah.
I'm setting a boundary, this is not about the other person. This is about me individually. So that's kind of the framework that I work with boundaries.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that boundaries are for me, and someone may not like that, but they don't have to because it's
Right.
about me.
Absolutely.
I think boundaries and relationships are like contracts.
Mm.
You're agreeing that this is your line.
Right.
And so you don't hold it up as a wall, right? It's
Mhm.
flexible according to what's going on around you. Often work with new moms and stuff like that. The boundaries have to be flexible moms because you're a new mom and things are changing very rapidly in your life. And so there's going to be an adjustment period for those boundaries and they're not going to look the same as before you had the baby. They're just not. And so they need to be flexible so that you can
Mhm.
adjust and adapt to.
Absolutely, right, and there's that, like, on Therapist Aid,
Mhm.
that boundaries form that I use, and I love using that one with clients where we're looking at what's rigid, what's porous, right, and then what's kind of like a healthy boundary, but I love that boundaries have to be flexible, and I think, like, even with doing values work, so in acceptance commitment therapy, ACT, right, that's part of the values is that we know that our values ebb and flow depending on the different seasons in our life. So a mom with a newborn child is going to have to place importance on certain things that's not necessarily going to apply in the toddler stage and then in the different stages, and so that flexibility is important, which is why I put in there like defining boundaries. It includes kind of like in accordance to our
Mhm.
values that fluctuate, right, our needs that fluctuate,
Yeah.
so and our morals to me is kind of like that just kind of foundation that we say like these are just like the non-negotiables. There's no fluctuating in certain things, right? There's just certain things that are just like I'm not bending on certain things.
Mhm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to stop you from, or trying to prohibit you from you doing what you want to do. Hence the boundary that says, I
Mhm.
can go so far with this.
Yeah, no, I really agree with that fully and support that. We talk about the Gottmans a lot on this channel, so I'm just gonna their view boundaries as
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
essential for healthy relationship, emphasizing that they are about managing your own behavior, not controlling your partner's, and are key to self-respect, autonomy, especially with difficult families. That's it. I do also see boundaries as like that key to self-respect, right? If I'm
Mhm.
respecting myself, it means I'm upholding, like I'm saying that these are things I'm not going to budge on, but it's not just like I'm not going to budge on this because these are my
Right.
boundaries. It's saying in order, like, okay, for example, I have a client who was like, "I don't wanna fight in front of the kids." I was
Mm.
like, "Perfect. That can be a boundary that you put up for you and your
Right.
spouse. How
Right.
are you guys gonna navigate that?" And he was like, "Oh."
Yeah.
So, he was like, "I'm not gonna fight in front of the kids." And I was
Ah,
like,
yes.
"That's a good way to phrase it, but
Yeah.
how are you going to deal with the other side of that? Because
Mm.
like, she's probably gonna come at you trying to fight."
Sure. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Right, and I think that's, like and, like, being able to explore, like, through that, like in that, what I hear is this, like, there's this kind of moral ethic code where it's like, I don't find it appropriate to be arguing or fighting in front of the children. And then you have the value system of, like, okay, it's important the value could be here, I don't know, let's just say autonomy, right? Being able to set that boundary, or the value is, like, maybe the innocence of their children,
Yeah.
right? And so that would be the value, and then within that, the needs being able to express, well, then I that's a whole whole 'nother topic of conversation. How do we know what we need? And I the framework I use with is we know what we need based off of what our body is telling us, based off of,
Mhm.
like, our emotions. And so if I feel uncomfortable, if this is something that I feel, um, very dysregulated with,
Mhm.
fighting and arguing within the kids, and that is a very much like a, I gotta set the boundary. If I
Mhm.
can't control you, it's not about control, but if
Mhm.
it starts to get to the place where if we're having a discussion, then it starts to get heated, and then I start to feel that dysregulation that's communicating a need to me, and then I'm looking around and I'm saying, "Okay, here's my values, the kids are here," then I pull
Mhm.
back and say, "I would like to continue this conversation, maybe in another room, or maybe we can continue this different like, in a different time when we're not so heated." And it's not about controlling the other person, it's more about removing yourself. You're saying, "I got too far," or we're getting too close. We're getting too close
Mhm.
to this line that I'm not crossing with you."
Yeah, and that's kind of, like, very much how it is, and how we worked through it, actually. It
Mhm,
was like, "That's great, have a conversation with your spouse to make sure she knows that this is a new boundary you're putting in place, and so
mhm.
you guys can come up with a solution for how you're gonna solve it if it happens in front
Right.
of kids."
Ooh, that's a good yeah, that's good. Yeah. Cool.
It yes, it was one of those things where he's kinda finding his voice in his marriage, right?
Mm,
And so it really helped him gain that autonomy
mhm.
that he really needs in life in
Right,
general,
right.
without feeling like he was, like, forcing a spouse to do something against
Sure,
her will,
sure.
because that
Absolutely.
was uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, and also too, like, if we are using call it a boundary, call it whatever you want, but if we are using anything to
Mhm.
control the other person,
Yeah.
well, I mean, manipulation, that's
Mhm.
not and I think anyways, and I think about how that breach of boundaries, if I am not respecting how somebody else is showing
Mhm.
up in their own body in the way that they want to do, right? And I cannot control it. I don't have to like it and I don't have to agree with it,
Yeah.
which is why the boundaries are for me to remove myself, to
Right.
be able to speak up and say, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not talking about that.
Right.
Right. And then, of course, if it escalates, and I think boundaries is a great way to de escalate
Right.
sometimes, but it's hard, boundary work is hard, especially like what you're talking about, like, even if this is like an established relationship, right? If we're talking marriage with kids and this is the first time this is being established, right? Like that's work, right? Because it's and I think that's kind of well, kind of chasing this rabbit. I think about when clients do bring in certain things and they're like, I think I need to set a boundary, or they're kind of really torn because they're feeling that sense of like discomfort of knowing something's not working. And the only way that I can start to find a sense of peace within myself or within the situation is if I set the boundary.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if we're waiting for the other person to set
Mhm.
the boundary, Um, we don't know how long we'll be waiting for, but we also don't know their level of comfort or discomfort with something.
That's very true. One of the really big ones that I just want to throw out there for people that men struggle with sometimes is no hitting. I see so many men who are like, yeah, my wife hits me. And they're
Wow.
like, it's no big deal. And I'm like, she's smacking you because she's mad at you. That is a big deal, even if she's not doing it in a way that hurts you. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, can we talk about physical abuse? Like women
Right.
physically abuse men too.
Listen,
Usually not considered a big deal because it's not powerful.
wow.
The problem is that it's not appropriate.
It's not. No. No. I mean, we did we not grow up hit
Yes.
people, right? Like, right? And it's one of those where it's like, now if he slaps you back,
Mm, right?
right? Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? What are we even like?
Mm,
Yes. Yes. But I understand too because there is this element of like, if the individual, let's just say if the woman does not see an
mhm,
issue with the way that they are expressing their anger because they're not necessarily afflicting pain.
mhm,
Right, because if we're thinking about I'm smacking them or hitting them and I'm not afflicting pain, they're looking at the physical aspect of it, not the emotional
yeah,
components of that. Also, too, you have now breached a boundary. You are using your anger, projecting it onto your
mhm,
spouse or your partner or whatever, right? And you are physically exerting your anger, projecting it onto them. And
mhm.
that is not I'm trying to I'm like, I don't even know what the justifications for that would be. And so
Yeah.
being
I
able
don't
to
think
say,
there is, but I just have a lot of men who feel very insecure, I guess is the right word, about responding in a way that protects themselves.
I see. Okay. Right. Because, okay. So then, wow. Wow. I guess so. Right. Because if they are just taking the hit, how can they, like, what can they do to protect and defend themselves without it getting to the point of now they're having to restrain or hurt or harm the other person? Right. And I think that
Mhm,
that does cross some difficult. Yeah, I can see the difficulty. Yes, for your clients. Yeah, for the for men who are having to not having to, but are experiencing physical assaults in their relationships because they feel powerless to do something without feeling like they're going to really hurt. They're not trying to hurt the other
mhm.
person. Wow,
Yeah.
wow, that's heavy.
Yeah. The boundaries thing is such a big deal for me because of that little piece of it, right? It's like we think about boundaries as like these emotional blocks, but sometimes they're also a physical block. They're a, hey, you're not going to hit me, right? That's like
Right,
the first step in a boundary.
right.
And if they're like, how dare you tell me this? I can hit you if I want to. Might be time just to walk away.
It's time to walk away. Yeah,
If you
yeah.
can't walk away because you're in a car, which tends to happen a lot,
Wow.
over and get out the
Mhm.
car.
Right. Yeah.
Grab your phone and walk away.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. And I think at that point now, like, I think we're even talking like within safety measures of this would then probably resort to the nervous system kicking into like a fight or flight fawning response, right? Where it's just, let me just get to safety. Cause
mhm,
probably right then and there, if they're smacking on me and I'm trying to establish that boundary, then that's not the time to establish that boundary. That's going to
mm-mm.
be the time to get to safety.
Yep,
Right. And to establish. And so maybe that's another aspect within this of adding in boundaries, how to establish a boundary, the timing of when to do it. It's usually not the best time to do this when we are in the middle of like the conflict, like you're saying, right? If we're in the car, that's dangerous and
mhm,
safety is the priority. Boundary is going to be the aftercare of what do you do now that this continues to happen, or even if it's just one time,
mm.
what do we do with that? Yeah.
So kinda like if you get home after the argument, right, you go back
Mm.
home instead of going out to eat or whatever you're doing, and you get out of the car or you're sitting in the car talking even, just go, "Can we talk about what just happened?" Right?
Right.
And
Right.
then establish, like, "That wasn't okay for you to hit
Mhm.
me. I
Mhm.
don't care that it didn't hurt me." It's a physical thing,
Mhm.
not an emotional thing. Emotionally, the fact that you would hit me is hurtful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And also too, there's like, we're not solving anything. Nothing's getting
Mhm.
solved with that. You're angry. You're allowed to be angry. Find other ways to deal with your anger or your hurt or
Right.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Mhm. And there
Yeah.
are so many other ways to deal with your hurt and anger than just hitting people, which is also why, right? Then we also tell people not to hit their kids anymore, right? Because there are other forms of discipline that work, first of all, so much better than
So much
spankings.
better. So much better.
Guys, I just want to put out there, if you have a child with ADHD, do not spank that child. You know why? They are
Mm,
waiting for you to spank them so that they can move on with their lives.
yes.
They are
Wow.
getting nothing from that lesson.
Nope, nope, not at all. And you think about like the nervous system within all of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, how is this? It literally, like, if something is physically harming us to the point of danger, the brain's
Mhm,
going to interpret this as danger. Okay,
mhm.
then our, what is it? Our prefrontal cortex is shutting down, or our frontal, like
Yep,
the logic part of our brain is shutting down. And now we are fully in survival
yep.
somatic, trying to like survive this physical pain, which
Mhm,
means that we're not even in a
mhm,
space in the head. The child's not even a space in the head to learn a lesson.
mhm. Not
The
at all.
only the only lesson that they're gaining at this point with being hit is fear.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm,
it. And I understand that sometimes, like, there can be the arguments of like, well, what if they're doing something that is more dangerous that could hurt or harm them in this? And I'm with you, Adriana, with the fact of like there are other ways. There are other ways. If the body's wired for safety,
mhm.
how are we supposed to help guide children to understanding what is safe and
Mm,
what is not?
right. Like, we
But
should
if
be helping them learn how to set up their own boundaries by having our
mm,
boundaries. I have a couple of parents who, just naturally, as they've like, they knew how they were treated as kids, and so as they're raising their kids, they apologize if they overreact, and
oh,
I love that so much, right?
yeah,
Like, they're literally going, "Oh, this was a boundary that I had that I violated, and I need to now
right,
go show them how I
right,
but also,
right.
I need to repair the relationship between us that I
Yes.
just hindered because I overstepped my boundary." It's a whole process, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful when I see it, and I'm like,
Mhm,
I tell parents all the time, like, if they tell me that that's what they're doing, I'm like, "I that's amazing that you're doing that and that you've learned
mhm.
to do that despite the fact that you were not raised in that."
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And isn't that like it's difficult because you are doing something, you're choosing the probably the more, and I'm going to say it's like the more difficult way, but you are choosing the more humane way of how to, and I think this just extends beyond parenting. I think just being able to understand like what is the purpose of hitting?
Yeah,
Why, when would it be justified for this, for there to be like physical, like spankings or hitting or whatever that is for children? And why are we doing that? And usually it's to get the behavior to stop.
mhm,
So if it is about behavior modification, well, I think we have a lot of information and resources out there that
mhm.
talks and speaks to how to shift and change behaviors within children that does not require physical force.
We also have
Yeah.
to remember that kids are not little adults. They're
Mm,
actually humans who
yeah.
are growing and trying to figure out how to live.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. And is that, I mean, listen, that's a hot topic too, because that also is like, and I think about like kind of tying this in with boundaries, right? Working with clients who are, either getting ready to get married or they're, or they're married and they're talking about having children or they're merging families, whatever the circumstances when it comes to children. This is
Mhm.
such an important conversation to have as far as in how do we want to like how do we want to even the language of punishment, like I'm struggling saying that, like how do we want to punish
Parents,
our
how do
children,
we
like how do we want the parent, right? But like how are we trying to discipline, thank you, yeah, how are we trying to discipline children when there are behaviors that are problematic, and
Yes.
I'm talking specifically problematic to their own safety and
Mhm.
problematic
The
within the
house.
family systems, like impact. Right, within the households, right? Like, it's not appropriate, for children to do certain things, right? You don't need to be running around with a knife, threatening, like, no, like, that's not what we need to do, right?
Mhm.
And I think having these conversations that was anyways, that was such an ADHD moment because that was, like, the first out of all the examples, I don't even know what that was, right? Like, I promise y'all I'm fine. I'm good, right? Like, I was just trying to think of something that was like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, don't do that," that's very, very dangerous, right? But there's so many different ways, but I think what's important is having these conversations. So, like,
Mhm.
throwing in kind of within the state of South Carolina, like, looking through the DSS laws and blah, 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 right? Like,
Mhm.
what is considered appropriate, discipline, physical discipline versus what is like crossing that line into
Mhm.
abuse. And that is one of those where I would encourage parents or caregivers of young children, go look up your DSS regulations if this is something that you're like, you know what, I don't have an issue with physical discipline. Okay,
Mhm.
that is your choice. Go look up the DSS regulations,
Mhm.
because if you don't have a problem with this, the child's school may have a problem with this,
Mhm.
or someone in public may have an issue with this. And if it is outside those DSS regulations, that is reportable,
Mhm,
right? And it's getting to the point where, like, having to sit with my clients and explain to them what
mhm,
is reportable. And it's, you would think it would be like well, you just don't take it so far. But
mhm,
hey, Brianna, I mean, we understand how trauma begots trauma, right? Like, you
mhm.
grow up in a home with a certain way of discipline,
Yep.
right? And then it's, you're thinking it's discipline. You grow up realizing that was abuse.
Mhm.
So,
And then some people avoid thinking about that because it makes them too uncomfortable, right? And so
yeah,
they never deal with it, and then they stay
right.
with kids as a result, even
Yes.
though it is abuse and they were uncomfortable with it as children, but they don't wanna deal with that. So they
Yeah.
just repeat the cycle.
Beep cycle. Absolutely. Because
So
how else am I supposed to get this child to do what I need them to do?
mhm. Yeah. I like oh, I wish I could remember her name at the moment, but I can't. So I'm not gonna try. There is this one, like, child therapist, psychiatrist or something. They're a psychologist, that's right. I think the right word. And she is like, remember that, like, when a child misbehaves, they're probably trying to, like, explain a need or at least, like, express a need. And if you kinda think about bad behavior that way, it kinda helps you take a second, right? What are they needing?
Mhm.
And that's why they did that behavior.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Yes, because our
Mhm.
behaviors are really connected to trying to meet a need with
Mhm.
children, right? Up until about the age of like pre-adolescence, so what,
Mhm.
10-ish, 12 years old, they are full dominant meat suit
Mhm.
operated, right? They're just running out here doing stuff just to be doing stuff, right?
Mhm.
It's like, you ask a child, why did you do that? And they're literally like, I don't
I don't
know.
know.
They literally don't know. They're like, I don't know what's going to happen if I
Mhm.
run around with a knife. This is so I
Mhm.
need to find another analogy, but, like, I don't know what's gonna happen, like,
Yeah.
if I throw this glass across the room, I wanna see what's
Mhm.
gonna happen because they have not experienced that before. Now
Mhm.
for us, we know as adults, don't throw the glass across the room because it's gonna shatter and it's gonna make a mess and you can hurt somebody, including yourself, right? And so there is a lot of preventative things that we try to help guide children into understanding, like, what throwing is, what's appropriate things to throw, what's not appropriate to throw, right? What
Mhm.
appropriate ways to express their anger. You're feeling angry and you wanna throw something. Here's a pillow. Throw it against the
Mhm.
wall, right? Throw it on the floor, right? And so being able to recognize what the behavior is, recognize what the need is because the body's trying to work through or regulate whatever sort of emotion, and being able to kind of course correct and say, here are healthier ways and
Mhm.
safer ways for the child to be able to move through and express through those things. And having to remember that they are a little child.
Mhm.
Their little meat suit doesn't know any better,
So,
right?
it's the
Doesn't know
first
any
time they're
better.
doing this.
It's the first time they've been here, right? Which takes a lot of patience
Yeah.
and also self-regulation on the side of the parent.
Mhm.
So, but that's
The
also
more the more calm the kid can be. It's called
mm,
co-regulation, and it's super important.
yeah.
Uh, I just wanted to point out one other thing to that, and that's, like, ADHD and autism in kids.
Mm,
Dysregulation looks different, right? So a lot of
mhm,
kids with autism will hit their heads or like
right,
slam their heads against walls because they're trying to regulate themselves. They don't know what else to do to
right.
like relieve whatever they're experiencing in order to get their needs met. This is the best way that they can express it.
Mm,
There's a reason why that is their
mhm,
response, and you
right,
have to literally like teach them, you don't have to respond this way.
right,
This
right,
is what we can do instead, and that
right.
does take a lot of patience, you're
It
right.
does.
Why? When we form boundaries within our relationships, we
Mhm,
really have to ask ourselves too, like, do we want kids? How do we wanna raise them? What boundaries are we gonna have in place? Are they gonna be allowed in our bedroom? Because 'Cause I've heard
right,
some stories about, "Nope, kids know our bedroom's off limits," and
right,
I'm like,
right.
"How?" And it
Yeah,
was like the
absolutely
parents just set up that that was the boundary they were
true.
gonna uphold, and they did.
Well, I wonder too, Adriana, right? Because I think that this is one of the things I notice a lot of times, like, not so much like boundary talkings about like with children raising, usually, okay, well, side note, that usually has to do with co parenting. So I work a lot with more with clients who are either going through divorces or they are not in like partnership with their children's parent. And so having to, in a lot of these like dynamics, they are tumultuous. So they're not the co-parenting dynamic is a disaster and we're trying to figure out how to set boundaries to work with my client working with their child's parent, the other parent, right? With that. Did you freeze? Are you still there?
Yeah, you froze for a second there, though.
Okay. I think it's my internet. It might be my internet. Okay. I don't know where that froze off, but like essentially working with my clients, it is with it's co-parenting, right? So
Mm,
whatever one, if it's working with the mom or the father, whoever I'm working with, that tends to be a bigger topic with working with boundaries.
mhm,
However, a lot of times when it ends up happening, it's like we have to be kind of careful. I'll speak for myself. I have to be careful as a clinician to not entertain all the what if case scenarios. Because
mhm,
ultimately what we're wanting to do is establish how are we going to handle whatever the situation is. If we can kind of establish what are we going to do when we have differences?
mhm.
And they would that's a probably an easier way to look at this, right? Because if we start going through all these what if case scenarios, none of those may ever happen. None of those may ever work. They may never come to light. But what will happen is that there will be a range of issues that will show up. How are we going to set the boundaries within our relationship dynamic to navigate whatever may come up when we are operating within these roles as parents or as partners or whatever that looks like? Because I cannot control the other person.
That is a phenomenal example for us to talk about when you're in a co-parenting relationship. Like, you can have boundaries at your house for you,
Yes.
but your partner or the other parent might not have the same boundaries.
Yes.
And how, like, this is part of the reason that we have to be flexible, right? Because kids need adjustment time. They can't just automatically switch on and switch off.
I
So
know.
then the boundaries have to be flexible enough to allow them that time to remember where they're at.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. That tends to be a lot of the situations that I'm helping clients navigate is like their household has a certain set of rules and maybe routines that they have that just works best for the child and the child's needs. And then when they go and spend the week or the weekend or even just the night with their other parent and that household has completely different set of rules and maybe they don't have a bedtime or maybe they don't have like their comfort, routines that help them. So when they come back, I've heard pretty much across the board with all my clients that they're like, my child is just off the
Mhm,
walls. They're angry at me. Right. And then they start, spiraling into what do you think the other person's saying about me? And I'm like,
mhm,
I really just think that it's just the child is dysregulated because they have shifted from what feels familiar, what feels home to a completely different set of rules, maybe a different set of routine. And it's just off. And so I've worked with clients with talking about we can't control what happens in another household. And you're going to have to work on
mhm,
keeping your anxiety to a minimum, right?
mhm,
Of all the worst case scenarios. And then I tell them, like, find out and through trial and error, you're going to need reconnection time.
mhm,
So when your child comes back home, whatever that looks like, set a set amount of time where it's connection between you and your child. Play a game, right? Watch a movie, cook something together, bake
mhm,
something, right? Just do something together to help the connection, help the child reconnect with you as the parent. Don't ask them,
mhm.
what did
What
they
y'all do
do
over
that week?
there?
What y'all do over there, right? Don't, did you go to bed? Don't like leave all of that alone. Leave all that because that's the stuff you talk with the
Mhm,
parent. And they would say this is what I would hear, but they're not telling me. And
mm,
I'm like, then how do you come to acceptance with
mhm.
this?
I'm like, they don't have to because that they don't have to.
You don't have to, and I'm so sorry. And you know what? Like, Adriana, like, I get it because, like, with my clients, I get it. I've done that personally in my own life, right? And so it is difficult. So going into this recognizing this is gonna be difficult, it's gonna be uncomfortable, you get to set the boundaries for
Mhm,
yourself, and then all you can do is invite the person that you are co-parenting with, you can invite them into being able to establish some sort of routine for the children.
mhm.
And when they are on the same page, it's a beautiful thing,
It
right? Where
really is.
you can co-parent, like
Mhm,
well. And unfortunately, there are way more circumstances where the relationship has been so strained and so foregone that they can't even see eye to eye on how to co-parent because it just becomes tit for tat. So one
mhm,
of the things that I told all my clients working through with this is I told them, I want you to let's just pretend that the person that you are having to co-parent with um, actually was like on board and helpful and
mhm,
on the same page. You guys were able to establish the same rules and regulations and boundaries and systems and things set up. And you guys were cordial towards one another. It was a really peaceful co-parenting and actually a really pleasant experience. How would you feel? How would you think? Who would you be? How would you show up? Right. And then I'd let them talk through that. And then I would say,
mhm,
go be that parent.
mhm,
Go be that co-parent, right? Because that is how you're wanting to show up. Lead with that.
Mhm,
That's your boundaries. Just because they're making things difficult in certain ways doesn't mean that you have to reciprocate that. You just keep showing up in a
mhm,
way where it's like whenever they one of the examples, this is such a long rant, but one of
mhm,
the examples was like thinking about like Mother's Day and Father's Day gifts,
mhm,
parenting, right? Do I get do I get my child's, father or mother, do I get them a gift? Because I don't want to, right? They suck, right? They're like, as a person, they suck, right? And
mhm,
I don't even think they're doing a great job as a parent, but do I need to get them anything? And I let them know, let's just say, depending on the relationship that you desire to have as a co-parent with this parent with your children, how would you want your children?
yeah,
How would you want your because this is for them. This isn't
mhm,
about you. How would you want your children to show up? Yes, I know your children can't go into the store and spend, $5 a card. So you're spending that money. Then you get to decide if you're going to do this for them. Maybe you make handmade cards if you don't want to spend the money. Maybe
yeah,
you take a video of the kids, wishing their parent happy Mother's or happy Father's Day, whatever it is, and you send them the video. And I'm
mhm,
like, there's so many different ways that you can do this
mhm,
that doesn't necessarily mean that you are withholding or you are enabling.
mhm,
You are just helping the children to recognize the parent and
mhm.
keeping your stuff and your stuff with the other parent out of that situation with the children.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point in that your relationship with your co-parent does not have to involve your kid.
Not at all. I,
Probably shouldn't.
I was going to say, I don't think it needs to. There's no point for it. There's no point for it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's one of those where what are we doing for the children?
Mm,
What are we doing for the child? Let's
yeah,
focus this on the child. And I get it because trying to co-parent, and maybe this is a completely different conversation, trying to co-parent with someone with a disordered personality, it's a nightmare.
mm,
So you're going to have a set of boundaries
mm,
as the individual
mm,
that are going to look probably different than the boundaries you set as a co-parent. Because believe it or not, unfortunately, right? And maybe you could speak to this too. Usually those who are like narcissistic or like borderline or just like
mhm.
very just not in very healthy spaces in the way that they are treating others in relationships tend to do a better job with their children up until a certain age.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
Like they are like the ideal parent, right? Up until they get to the age where now we have to actually start being a little bit more responsible and a little bit more patient
Mhm,
because now the child is starting to have their own identity and starting to have
mhm,
their own ways of doing things. And so usually the co-parenting part is more difficult because it's the person
mhm,
to person, not necessarily the parenting dynamic. And not in
mhm.
all cases, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So I want to switch real quick and talk about boundaries in romantic relationships because I think this is a really important um, area that we sometimes forget about. Like, I think everyone should know your spouse or
Yeah.
partner is allowed to set boundaries with you.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like they can 100%. You do not own that person because people are not property.
Right, and
But
that hurts some clients, right? They don't
mhm,
like that truth. I think they know it, like, they know
mhm,
it, but it's protective, like, to kind of,
mhm,
like, counter what you're saying, like, the client that cringes, right? Or maybe the person listening to this is like, "I know that, but hearing you say that makes me feel icky about myself, makes me feel very gross." And I understand that it's like, well, because if you had full control of this person, what needs would be met?
mhm.
Okay, well, that's a need that you have to go meet. That's within your emotional boundaries. But you're absolutely right. We are individuals. We do not own other people. I don't care what the title or the role in which this person has within your life.
Yeah. So anyway, I just feel like that was just so important to say.
Mm. So I'm thinking so boundaries within romantic relationships. So this is one of those where, my gosh, like you just have to pick a topic and see so if I'm thinking about just basic boundaries, I'm thinking about emotional boundaries,
Mhm.
physical boundaries, time boundaries, financial boundaries. I mean, you
Yeah.
literally just kind of go down the list of all these different areas that boundaries can be established. I'm going to say first and foremost, it's most important for the individual to know their own boundaries
Yes,
apart
100%.
apart from the other person. If you know your boundaries and if you've done the work, you've established these are my boundaries, these are the things, these are my non-negotiables, right? Okay, so I'll talk about myself. I'm single, divorced. And so for me, being out here on the dating scene,
Mhm.
there are some very firm boundaries that I have. So for myself, for first dates, I do coffee and conversation
Mm,
up
mhm,
first because I was out here single mom. I don't have time to be going out here trying to, do a different date every night of the week. I'm tired. I'm working full time. I got to raise this kid, right? And I'm doing all these different going like grad school and all these different things, right? So for me to kind of reduce the
mm,
time that I was giving into certain circumstances, a time boundary was really important for me. So going on dates was like, hey, coffee and conversation is where I'm at. And
mhm,
that's where I started because for me, it was like, I want to know that I can have a conversation with you.
mhm.
Right? I just wanna know that you are who you say you are because online dating is a nightmare, right? And
Yeah.
so let me just know that you're actually a real person. And
Yeah.
Adriana, I'm gonna be honest, like that boundary has weeded through a lot and it has saved me a lot of time,
Mhm.
right?
I'm
And
not
so Huh?
I said I'm not surprised.
Right, right. And so for me, it was one of those where it was like my child at the time, like, because my daughter's 18, right? So I'm a bird launcher. And so I've got a lot more
Mhm,
time on my hands, right? So those boundaries are flexible. So
mhm,
it doesn't just have to be coffee and conversation now, right? But then just speaking within this time, I didn't have a lot of time. Uh, and I could have made time, right? Because there was
mhm,
like, you can always make time. I was choosing what was valuable to me,
mhm,
which was my child, which was having enough like emotional and physical space for my child, like, after work, right? And so I wasn't going to take away time from her to go and do dates or even if it was just certain things with friends or trying to take certain jobs. So this isn't just romantic relationships, this is across the
mhm,
board, but speaking within that, having to establish those boundaries. So for me, it was important for me to know what my boundaries were up front. So when I actually go out there and I'm talking or if I'm dating, I can communicate what my boundary is. And a lot of times, like communicating my boundaries and saying, so here's my boundary on time, right? Like I have this time and this time and time. No, you just state. It's just like, are you available for a date? So my free time, I have this
mhm,
time available that's free.
mhm,
I can do a lunch meetup to start off with. We could do coffee and conversation for about an hour or so, right?
mhm.
And that's one of those where it's like, that was what I set for myself
Yeah.
because what was most important was parenting my daughter.
Mhm. Yeah. It's like you prioritize, like, what you need,
Right.
what you wanted to focus on. Your
Yeah.
focus wasn't on dating. Dating's
Right.
nice, right? Nice to find a partner, but that's not the
Yeah.
focus. The focus is
Yeah.
your kid.
Absolutely. So, what's interesting now, right? So, being kind of this bird launcher in my life and kind of leaning more into romantic relationships, that boundary of time, it's still a boundary, right? Because my time is still important to me. And so that's one of those where that's shifted. I have a little bit more time now, but
Mhm,
guess what? My time is still important to me. So when I
mhm,
go and I'm dating or if I'm, connecting with somebody, I am still responsible for my time and connections with somebody else. So those are the things like that's just an example, but I'm thinking about like other things about emotional boundaries, mental, like our mental health boundaries, right? So for me, I will, I'm a therapist who has a therapist.
mhm,
And I may not ever not have a therapist,
uh-huh,
right? There
mhm,
may be seasons within my life where I may not need to see my therapist, every other week or every week, but that's important to me. That is a value for me. And so that is something that I will always and continue to invest in.
mhm,
Now, is it a requirement for somebody that I partner with to be in therapy? Not necessarily, but it is going to be important for that to be something that they understand and respect that.
mhm.
And also understand I can't be their therapist.
Yes, that.
Not going to be your therapist.
Yeah, I refuse.
Right? And so we can work through the things, we can talk through things, we can listen, you share the whole entire world. But when it starts to come leaning into this element of like, I feel like I'm having to emotionally now take responsibility for somebody that is a full grown adult, I'm not doing that.
No.
I can't do that. I do that for
Mhm,
my full-time job. Now, here's the thing. Other people who are not in this field, that may
mhm,
not be their boundary. So that's why I said, like, it's important to know what your boundaries are when you're like, and that starts with yourself personally. What are your boundaries? What are your values? And how do you protect those? Not guard brick wall, but
mhm.
how are you nurturing? How are you ensuring that you are taking care of yourself? Because then you get to bring that full expression of yourself into your relationship.
Yeah. I think that this is where like premarital counseling or couples counseling can be super helpful. Just helping you have those conversations about not
Mhm.
only what your boundaries are, but like if there's any compromise on those boundaries or any
Mhm.
like conjunction or combination that like collaboration in
Mhm.
those boundaries. And then like also like what happens if
Right.
the boundary is violated.
So important,
Mhm.
right? It's so important. That's actually, that's interesting you say that because that has come up a lot lately recently with clients as they're like working through different circumstances with their partners or with their spouse. And we're talking about boundaries and let's use the example of just like someone who maybe insults someone,
Mhm,
right? If they use it, like they're just using their words in a way that is hurtful or like
mhm.
not very pleasant. And so being able to say, like, it hurts me, it hurts, like, I feel hurt when when you talk to me this way. I'm going to have to ask you to not talk to me this way. Right. What happens if they do it again? Like, what happens if they do it again? And
Mhm.
so it's one of those where being able to say, "Hey, if you are going to continue talking to me this way, actually just going to go
Mm,
like in the other room, or I'm going to go sleep on the couch, or I'm
mm.
going to go do blah, 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 blah." Right. Working with clients who have spouses who are addicted to certain substances. And
Yeah.
this becomes a lot, there's a little bit higher stakes. And so I've had clients who set the boundaries where they're saying, if you want to drink or if you want to participate in drugs or whatever substance it is, I can't control you. I don't like this. I don't like that this is a part of our relationship or part of our family dynamic. And so if you are drunk or if you are whatever, I'm going to go I'm gonna go stay someplace else. Like, I'm gonna go, right? And some people will be like, "Well, this is my house. Why do I have to leave?" At this point, are you gonna go and ask somebody who is intoxicated or inebriated to go drive into someplace else?
Uh-huh.
If
Mm.
you have go sleep in the other bedroom, right? Go
Right.
sleep on the couch, right?
Mhm,
Or go, "Hey, I'm gonna go spend a couple of days with my friend." And these are the things where it's like, that's a boundary that's set that I'm not going to be around you when you are this way.
yeah. Yeah, and it's completely appropriate, and like I said, and it's really good to have those conversations before the ish like you said, you can't have the conversation in the moment, you need to have the conversation before or
Mhm.
after it happens,
Right.
um, so that you can set guidelines
Sure.
for what you ex for y like, the what you expect. So,
Sure.
I'm gonna say it like this, like, some people don't know,
Right.
like, what it is like to be in a healthy relationship, and that's perfectly
Mhm.
okay. That does not mean that person is hopeless, right? It means
Mhm.
that, no, we're just gonna have to set some boundaries with that person, and then if they continue to overstep those boundaries, then we get to have further conversations about what that looks like and
Mhm.
how it can change, or if it's gonna change, and if it's
Mhm.
not, what I am
Right.
going to do as a result.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. So to that point, right? So some people may be saying, "Hey, what if something happens that hasn't happened before? What if
Yeah.
and then this is another thing, right? Like, what if
Mhm,
what if a new version of my partner shows up that I've never seen before, or they had
mhm,
been withholding this from me and like the world's turned upside down, right?" So these situations where it's like, I didn't think I'd have to set a boundary with my
mhm,
partner that said, "Hey, don't, I don't know, lie to me, right? Don't sneak
mhm,
things around." Just the assumption that says, "I thought we were on the same page with this," and then we realize we're not, right? I had a client recently share like an experience and how they set a boundary where I literally was like
mhm,
cheering for them in session where there was an incident where their partner had spoke to them in a way that they were like, "This is a nope, nope," right? And
mhm,
it's a newer relationship. And so, right, so they're kind of, just getting to still see the different sides of one another. And this shows up. And so for them, what they did is that when they got back into the place where they were sharing the space together,
mhm,
they packed stuff and they left.
mhm,
And it wasn't anything that was like, this wasn't violent, right? This wasn't anything that was necessarily aggressive, but it was a boundary that this client had said that I don't care who you are. Nobody gets to talk to me this certain kind of
mhm,
way. And if that's how they want to show up, I will remove myself. So that's what they did, right? So they got back to the space that was shared. They got their stuff and they said, "I'll see you in a couple of days." Whoa, where are you going? I did not like how that
mhm,
happened. I want space. I want space from this, right? And so what ended up happening is that because they set that boundary for themselves, this wasn't, and we talked about this, right? Like they were like, I didn't want it to seem like I was punishing them. And I was like, this doesn't sound like you were punishing them. There's a difference between
mhm,
setting the boundary and there being consequences when somebody crosses those boundaries. Of
mhm.
course, they didn't know the boundaries. That's why they said, I'm just gonna, we're gonna take some time, right? I'm gonna take some time. I'm making space for myself. And when they reconnected, the partner was able to reflect and say, "I think I was actually really triggered. That had whatever happened that had nothing to do with you, but that space created
Yeah,
time for the other person to do some reflection to better understand how their behaviors wasn't necessarily like it wasn't like a it just was not what my client was willing to tolerate. And this was the first time and they did that. And
Mhm,
I explained to them, I said, "You set a boundary, right?
mhm,
Sometimes we don't have to necessarily say, you crossed my boundary today.
mhm,
Sometimes the boundary looks like I'm taking space over here
mhm.
because I'm not comfortable with what's happening right now."
Yeah, I love it. Really, truly. And like I
Right.
said, and this is why like conversations need to happen. Hopefully before we like start living with people.
Right.
I know in reality that doesn't always happen, but
Yeah. Right. Right.
it's one of the reasons why maybe slowing down is a smart idea.
Right. Yes. And
Um,
that's what and I agree, right? Because there's like certain things that you can kind of talk
yeah.
and I think it's usually in theory, right? It's
Mhm.
if this how do you handle this? And a lot of times what we are doing is we are pulling from previous experiences
Mhm.
with boundaries that we already have established. And so maybe a simple takeaway when it comes to doing the boundary work, a simple takeaway is to kind of just sit back and say, what are my values? In what ways do I nurture and protect these things that are important to me, right? That would be my boundaries. How do I communicate boundaries? What happens if someone unknowingly violates one of my boundaries? What happens when somebody repeatedly violates my boundaries when they already know what the boundary is,
Mhm.
right? That's a big one to really spend some time, right? Because if I establish what my boundary as a girl, holiday season, so this happens a lot with families. What happens for, the 900th time when your parents approach a topic that you have repeatedly said, we're not talking about this, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and so those are the things of being able to say, being able to know for yourself, what are my boundaries? What's important to me? How am I establishing these? How am I communicating these? What happens if somebody unknowingly violates my boundary? What happens when somebody knowingly violates my boundary repeatedly? Because that is the responsibility of the individual.
So I wrote on my notes, boundaries reflect respect.
Mhm.
And so what I mean is like they tell us how they tell other people how they should treat us and
Right.
allow us to prioritize what is authentic to us. And they keep
Sure.
us safe, really, truly. But like if I'm respecting myself, if I'm respecting my values and who authentically I am, right? You're
Right.
not gonna cross my boundaries.
Right.
But if I'm
No.
not, you might cross a lot of boundaries.
Oh, absolutely. You were so right. Like I think one of the things that I think most people fall into that is people pleasers.
Mhm. Oh,
Speaking as a recovering people pleaser,
100% people pleasers,
right?
yes.
Right? Recovering people pleaser. That is one of those where you can't be a people pleaser if you have boundaries.
You can. I'm recovering people pleaser too. Let me tell you. So I used to be really bad, and I've literally just gotten to a point where I'm tired, like literally
Yes.
fatigued every day. So I have to have boundaries because I have
Yes.
limitations due to chronic illness,
Mm,
right? And if I don't
yeah.
respect myself, like I'm just going to run myself ragged, and that helps no one.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it usually takes like I think about like in the work, in the therapy room, I there's a lot of patience that I encourage clients who are working through, like starting to like deconstruct their people pleasing tendencies and where does that come from and why do I do this, right? And better understanding that. And a lot of times we can like loathe ourselves and that
Yeah.
part of us that needed to people please to survive certain circumstances, most likely family dynamics that did not have boundaries,
Yeah.
that did not respect boundaries. And so what happens is that when you grow up in environments where there is not respect, there is no boundaries, so therefore there is no respect for the child. The child cannot say no. The child doesn't really have a say on really anything, and we go through all of that throughout our whole life of silencing ourselves,
Mhm.
minimizing our needs and being able to just show up and people please means that
Mhm.
sometimes we are doing things beyond our limits. We are
Mhm.
doing things beyond what is actually like appropriate for us,
Mhm.
taking on burdens and responsibilities. And this sounds like, right? So if it's like, if I can like ring a little bell that says, when you hear this, please understand that this is people pleasing tendencies, is when I hear this a lot. I just feel bad for not for not calling my parents during
Mhm,
holidays, but they haven't tried to contact me in years. I feel bad that I didn't, do this. I had to say no to somebody. I just feel so bad. Right? That is misplaced guilt. And that usually shows up when we stand up and we set a
mhm,
boundary for ourselves. We establish that we have a need, and then
mhm,
guilt shows up when we start actually honoring our needs.
mhm,
And a lot of the work that I do with clients having working through this is learning and better understanding what your emotion of guilt is trying to communicate, and how to start to shift that dynamic, right? Because yes, a lot of times if you have not had boundaries like
mhm,
shown to you
mhm,
because you grew up in an environment where there were no boundaries, right? Like you're having to learn for the first time what your needs are
mhm,
and how to, like, actually push back on people when they're doing things that you don't like, or pushing
mhm,
back on responsibilities that are not yours. And that's hard. That's not the nervous system's gonna say,
mhm.
danger, hello, right? And the guilt that we are feeling is more so saying, this is probably going to cost us connection. This is going to get us in trouble, right?
For
It's
sure.
gonna cost us something. And in those old systems,
Mhm.
it is absolutely 100% correct.
Yeah.
But in healthier dynamics where we start to if you feel guilt
Mm,
for setting a boundary, where that is a really good indication that you have most likely shifted out of those environments where you've had to squash your needs
yeah.
because you didn't feel that guilt in those situations where you just did whatever, right?
Mm.
Because you were in compliance with that unhealthy system.
Yes, there are 2 things I wanna bring up with this, though. I've had a couple clients feel like their level of privilege, like the level of privilege that they experience allows them to guilt themselves, right? Into
Okay.
doing things and crossing boundaries that they probably
Ooh,
shouldn't be crossing.
wow.
That is probably one of the most difficult situations for you to hold a boundary in. I think that like I have this saying and it's like, why are you contributing to your own suffering? If it
Mm,
causes you to suffer, like you were
mm,
being harmed by what you were doing, why are you continuing to do it? Your level of privilege doesn't matter if you're being harmed.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
and it's there's, like, no, like, straight answer to that one. I wonder, though, if what is happening is that we have a nervous system or we have a defense mechanism where we dissociate, so we're not technically really listening to the cues that's communicating when something's too far,
Mhm.
or we're not experiencing empathy for the other person because we don't fully have access or we have underdeveloped whatever that emotion is. And I want like in the, if so privilege, are you meaning like in those like relationship dynamics where there's like a hierarchy of power?
Not necessarily, but sometimes.
Yeah. I was thinking like specifically like parent-child
Mhm.
dynamics, right? Where,
Yeah.
where the
Sure.
child feels responsible for maintaining a relationship with the caregiver, the parent, where it actually is the opposite.
Mhm.
Right? And so but then the child tends to get punished, even as an adult child, the adult child tends to get punished
Yeah.
by being shamed,
Yeah.
by being put down, by passive aggressiveness, by, right, all these different things, and so that pushes the adult child to wanna create more space and distance, but the
Mhm.
parent is, "I'm your parent. I brought you into
Mhm.
this world. I'll take" right? And so there's just seems to be like there's not that level of empathy and understanding that, hey, maybe they're their own individual person and that I have been requiring something of them that they should have never been responsible for.
And some people don't have that level of introspection, right? So we also have to recognize when people are not going to get it or
Yeah.
don't want to get it, and we need
Mhm.
to then place another boundary to
Mhm.
step away. Again, we're harming ourselves by repeatedly putting ourselves in a position to
Mhm.
be harmed.
Right. But and is right. And so that's the thing though, is that if that has been labeled,
Mhm.
let's say that experience has
Yeah.
been labeled as obedience,
Mhm.
or if that label has been or that has been labeled as
Selfish.
um
Or it's like
right. Yeah, I'm being selfish if I don't comply,
Mhm.
or if I'm not being a good person.
Yeah.
I'm not
Mhm.
being a good, wife or husband. I'm not being a good girlfriend or boyfriend. I'm not being a good
So
mother. If I, right, right, whatever it is, I'm just not right. And so if I just keep allowing the hurt, and this is, and Adrian, this is where the messed up
mm,
part about it is. that we've become so desensitized to that
Mhm.
harm that we don't even realize the intensity of it. This
Mhm.
is and it's actually so recently starting to see the loops that
Mhm.
clients have been experiencing where it's like you're constantly showing up in the same
Mhm.
dynamic, hoping it's going to
Oh,
change, but it's not changing. It still hurts.
yeah.
It's still harmful. It's still all of this, right? And so having to hold that unconditional positive guard to be able to sit and say, there is something here.
Mhm.
Like, I believe that if you truly wanted to be out of this circumstance and out of the situation, you would. And I think it comes down to a couple of things. One, it comes down to being able to own our choice. Why am
Yeah.
I staying? Why am I still staying in this circumstance? Right. If
Mhm.
I, what you're saying, if I'm still choosing the relationship, I'm still choosing what is on the outside harm,
Mhm.
but I'm most likely named this as I'm choosing love,
Mhm.
choosing resiliency,
Mhm.
right? I'm choosing to, not give up. I'm choosing potential. And so
Mhm.
what we do is that when we choose the potential of someone or something in a circumstance, we're not actually recognizing what is present.
Mhm.
If our nervous system gets locked into that potential and those moments where things feel good, when it gets terrible again, we're so desensitized. And
Mhm.
we're like, well, this is just part of the cycle. We're
Yeah.
cycling, right? So if we don't have those boundaries established, if I don't know what I need, how am I supposed to know how to set the boundary? Because I'm afraid everything within my body says if I disrupt this pattern because I need to feel XYZ, I
Mhm.
may lose this other person, and
Mhm.
that uncertainty will shut the nervous system
Yeah.
down.
I actually have one of these right now that I talk to. And the way I kind of I so I'm a like super validator, right? I validate my clients like way too much probably. But I like, a lot of them will come to me and they'll be like, "I feel like such a bad person." I'm like, "But are you?"
Right,
Or I'll be like, "You know, you need to understand that you do deserve good things. Like, you do
right,
actually do like, you keep telling me that, like, you wish you would have stayed in this, like, abusive situation, but you
mhm,
don't deserve that.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Like, you deserve
right,
more than people who are going to abuse you."
right,
And
absolutely.
helping
Well,
them kind of come to the realization that that actually can feel good and not just scary.
yeah, but you think about it too, right? Like, if I don't know healthy connection, that feels because healthy connection this is a thought,
Mhm.
healthy connection requires us to feel secure within ourself, to be able to stand on our own emotionally. Right? Like being
Mhm.
able to hold our own emotionally. So then you kind of start dabbling a little bit into like insecure attachments, right? So if
Yeah.
I am continuously staying in this dynamic
Mhm.
and I don't like it and I
Mhm.
can't seem to find my way out of that, then this is not necessarily the other person issue. This becomes how much are you really like seeing and caring and loving yourself?
Yeah.
How much do
Yeah.
you see your worth, right? And a lot of times I would be like, "Well, I don't have a worthiness problem." And it's like, "No,
Uh-huh.
no, because if you knew your worth,
Mhm.
you would set these boundaries that
Mhm.
establish what people will or will not do." So, here's the thing, Adriana, if my inner critic is constantly telling me, "You're so stupid. Why did you do that?"
Mhm.
You're such a moron. You're so ugly.
Mhm.
Nobody's ever right? If those are the thoughts in
Mhm.
my head that I have whirling all day, every day to like
Mhm.
on repeat. Of course, I'm not going to recognize my own worth and my own value because my own thoughts about myself are abusive or
Mhm.
harmful or
Mhm.
right and what I am experiencing in
Mhm.
my relationship dynamic is
Yeah.
an actual representation of the thoughts and it
Mhm.
just starts to feed it's like it's confirmation.
Which is why boundaries with ourself are as equally as important, right?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
if you don't also hold a boundary with yourself, even though you know you need it, what are
Yep,
you doing?
absolutely. I tell my clients all the time when they come in and they're saying like, "Oh, I'm just so terrible. I'm the worst." And I'm like, "Hey, don't talk to my client that way. You're not allowed to talk to my client that way, right?" Because it's like, how are you if you don't want other people talking to you that way, stop talking to yourself that way.
Mhm.
And I know it's easier said than done, right? But
It
take
is.
inventory. How are you thinking about yourself? How are you speaking about yourself? And it's one of those things where it became a practice where it's like, I tell myself, I enjoy my own company. I know I'm a delight, right? And I'm not sitting over here just trying to be like this arrogant, person. If I don't like my own company and I don't know what that's like, how am I supposed to be in the company of other people?
Yeah.
and know what is healthy connection for me. I have to have a healthy connection with myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also, I do this thing because it works. And I say you have a depressed brain, you have an anxious brain, and then you have the self, right?
Mhm.
And the reason why I came to the self was not because of IFS. I came to
Okay.
the self because I was reading through IFS and ACT and a bunch of these other techniques. And I was like, why are we talking about the same self?
Oh, yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, oh, so it is the same self. All these techniques have the same self. They all lead back to the same place, which is I
right.
have to feel good and comfortable with me first,
Mm,
but I
mm,
also have to recognize that the depressed and anxious thoughts are not me. Those are separate from me.
yes,
So
yes,
I'll say, like, that's my depressed brain talking. And I know that's my depressed brain talking, but
mm,
my depressed brain is trying to get their needs met. What are the needs of a depressed brain to stay
I love that. Oh, I
and
love
so
that.
it helps to identify, like, who's really talking right now, the self or the depressed or anxious brain.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, and I love parts work. Parts work is my jam, and I love it because, like, even with IFS, with how do I identify who is self? How do I know
Mhm.
when self is in charge,
Yeah.
and how do I know when my anxious brain is actually leading the conversation, or how do I know when depressed brain has entered the chat? And that's important to be able to know. If I don't know self, like, who I am apart from these emotions, from these different, like, elements of depression or anxiety, if I don't know who self is, who I am as myself, I will believe anything that my depressed brain or my anxious brain tells me.
Yeah. I actually had a client ask that the other day. She said, during the day, I'm fine. I'm working, I'm interacting, and then I get home and I try to go to sleep at night, and these thoughts just attack my brain. And I don't
Mhm,
know which ones are actually true. And I said, what happens at night is you're no longer distracted. Like the parts of your brain, the anxiety, the depression are no longer distracted, right?
yeah,
By the things in your day. But
mm,
also she's working and she's enjoying her job for the first time and she feels good about herself, right? So
yeah,
that's also like her true self.
right,
It's coming out and expressing itself during the day when she's distracted. And that's allowing her to reduce the anxiety. And then when
mm,
she go back home and be in this other space that doesn't
mhm,
necessarily allow her to be her,
right,
that's when the anxiety and depression come back.
absolutely. And also that, like, that makes my heart, like, feel so tender because I like listening to those different parts of clients and
Mhm.
hearing the narratives and the way,
Yeah.
like, like, and knowing that, like, this hurts, like, this
Mhm.
it hurts to hear it. I will tell my clients sometimes, like, "That's really hard to hear. That's
Mhm.
how you think and feel about yourself."
Yeah.
Even if you say you don't believe it, it's still there. But
Mhm.
also to, like, how can we shift that to saying, "Oh, this must be a part of me that really is hurting.
Mhm. Right.
How can I start to nurture and love that part of that anxious mind that's now finally getting my attention, that has been collecting all of these, like, the highlight reels of worst
Mhm.
case, the things that we totally messed up, right?
Mhm.
The way that, like, I was thinking about this today, the way that, like, I was super excited, had to go to the post office, and I was super excited to go see my usual, local post person, right? And we will listen, we'll ADHD out real hard, we'll sing, and we're having a good time, and we're like, "Life is this," right? I got his whole life story one day, right? And I was, like, so excited to go see my buddy Joe at the post office, right? And so when I got up there, I was like, "Yeah," and he was just like he was right, and he was in throes of it, right? And I just was like, "Oh, he must be having a really tough day if his light has been dimmed so much today," right? And I will take, like, and if I'm not careful, I will take that and be like, "No, did I did something wrong," or, like, and I remember what that anxious mind would sound like, right? Like that people pleasing, right? I wasn't trying to people please. I genuinely just, that's our normal interaction, but today was he was just not that.
Mhm.
And so then at the end of the day, when it gets quiet, my mind will start to spiral and say,
Mhm.
"Yeah, you really messed up. That was so stupid of you."
Mhm.
Right? Like, "Just calm down. Why you just doing too much?" And instead of being like, "That was a part of me that was embarrassed. How do I nurture? How do I say, even to that part of my brain, I set the boundaries for myself. I don't talk to myself that way. How can I then let self start to soothe and nurture and show kindness and compassion to these different things that show up in my mind or in my body? How can I care for myself?"
So I think that this is where boundaries come into play, right? So I'm going to tell a story first because,
Mm.
ADHD.
I love a story. Yes. Let's go. I'm here.
I had, it's not how you're supposed to do things, but I allowed a friend to do a regression on me, right?
Oh,
Because I
wow.
have
Okay.
trouble feeling what's in my body. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I never know. And
Yeah.
so I allowed her to do the regression because it allowed me to then better understand myself.
Okay. Yeah.
And so from the regression, there was one day that something happened and I was like, "Oh, you're feeling a lot of shame, but this shame is not from adult you. Like adult you
Mm.
does not feel shame."
Yes.
Was
Yeah.
like, "Holy fuck.
Mhm. Mhm.
Adult you doesn't feel shame." So
Oh,
adult
wow.
you is not the one hurt here. Right? You
Uh,
still have to nurture the
yeah.
like child you that does feel that shame. And so it allowed me to then go and get that need met in a way
Mm.
that met the need, right? In a
Mhm.
healthy way. And I don't know. I've been in a really good mood since then. So I really feel like I did a lot of profound work.
That's huge. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, like that's I mean, that's such a valid point too, right? Because a lot of times we have these feelings and we think that this feeling is exactly like and it's conflicting, right? It's like,
Mhm,
but I don't believe this about myself. I don't think this way about myself, but I'm feeling this way. And it's like, oh, that must be a younger emotion
mhm.
showing up. And so I'll ask the question, how old does
Yeah.
this feel? And the second that we usually ask, like, how old does this feel? The brain already has, a time frame that it can at least place somewhere on the timeline of this frame. And then it usually kind of folds into, well, this is what was happening around this time. And where we think about these situations where it's like, I didn't really think that that was such a big deal.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be a big deal for your body to still hold on to the emotions that we did not know how to process.
And the thing for me is that I was so young. Like even in the regression, she asked how old I was, and I was like, I have no clue. I just knew I was
Yeah.
really little. So for me, I couldn't even pinpoint. So it means the feeling has been around
Wow.
for
For
such
so
a long
long.
time
Wow.
that I couldn't even pinpoint where it came from. But the
Incredible.
fact that I was finally able to recognize and
Yeah.
do something about the fact that it didn't belong to me was
Right.
so amazing.
That's profound. Wow. Wow.
My laptop is dying. I'm so sorry.
No.
I'm like, we're
Like it.
probably gonna have to wrap up the show. Time
Yeah.
to plug.
Oh, and we don't want it to die and lose the recording.
So this was great. This was
Yeah.
wonderful. I really loved you being here.
Well, thanks for having me. This is so fun. I love talking about boundaries and because it really is one of those where it's like listen, I understand the work. I've had to do it myself, right?
Mhm,
The more that you get into this work, the more that you realize, wow,
mhm.
boundaries really does make a huge difference. It affects so many different areas in our lives.
Really, and you have to. You can't ignore that you need to set boundaries. You have to
Yeah.
set them. And like I said, even with myself. So if I didn't set that boundary with myself, knowing, hey,
Yeah.
wake up, that's not you,
Yeah.
right? I would have been swimming in this negative emotion.
Yeah.
But I've put a boundary in place with myself that says, hey, we're going to be aware. So
Yes.
we're going to ask ourselves when we're feeling something because negative you does not feel like you. Now we know that doesn't align with who I want to be and who like what
Mhm.
my values are. I'm going to start questioning it more. That's
Yeah.
the boundary. I
Yes.
question because it's
Yeah.
not me.
In an IFS, Papa Schwartz would say that curiosity is one of the
Yeah.
8 C's. How do we know that we're operating within self? We are compassionate, we are curious, we are creative, and there's the other 5 that I can't name off right now.
Yes.
But that's a great place to start where it says, "Well, how do I know if I'm operating within self versus operating within a negative emotion or or maybe like an older emotion?"
Hmm.
And curiosity is such a good place. If I can be curious, that's a good spot.
Yeah. Anyway, this was really great and exciting, and we're totally going to invite you back later.
Do
We got a lot of shows, so we
let's
got
do
a
it.
lot of topics.
Oh, I love to yap. Let's do it. I'm a yapper. Let's go.
It's been really great. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Jana.
absolutely. Thank you so much.